If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock. You are listening to the Maura Murray series. This is episode 68, Legitimacy. And I am, of course, your host, Bruce McGuire. And this is not going to be an incredibly long episode. I just wanted to call attention to what the case would look like online if there were no narrative steers and if there wasn't a massive concerted effort to obfuscate, troll, and steer in this case. Because again, the Maura Murray case is unique for a lot of different reasons. Not just for the circumstances, the law enforcement response, the media coverage, the behavior of individuals close to the case and investigators years after the fact. All of that aside, just the online activity itself is very unique in the Maura Murray case. Just the psychology of narrative steers, the desperation for them to shut down logical lines of inquiry while trying to get everybody desperately and based on nothing but blind faith alone to go along with certain narratives. And very, very telling. Again, we do not see this in other cases. It's very unique to the Maura Murray case. But I wanted to address what it would look like if there was no steering and none of this obfuscation, what the case would look like. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If that's still not working, you can just go to youtube.com/Mindshock or youtube.com/Mindshock True Crime for only true crime episodes. Help support the channel, raise awareness, not just for this missing persons case, but for other cold cases, wrongful convictions, and unanswered questions in many cases to ensure that justice is truly served. The best way to do that is through awareness. So like this podcast, share it across social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So as I stated from the outset, it's very obvious that there are steerers and obfuscators. I mean, trolls, I don't think anybody disputes the trolls, but they get mixed with the official, so-called official narrative steerers and the obfuscators. And there's still a contingent outside of these, I guess, just gullible or naive individuals who don't believe that there's a concerted effort of any kind, even now, with so much more evidence coming out for it. Of course, Aaron Larkin, Bill Rausch. You have Aaron Larkin with the moniker Guerrilla Ontologist. You have Bill Rausch, trained in the military, to use social media for psychological operations. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. How much more obvious does it have to be? You have all of these individuals in or around D.C., this D.C. circle. Again, if you haven't checked out the previous podcast episode, check it out. That just inject themselves into the case. You have Aaron Larkin herself, former teammate, supposed teammate of Maura Murray. Did they actually run against each other? Who knows? She happens to have the same job Maura Murray had as a security desk supervisor. She happens to have Kate Markopoulos as her big sister. This is the person closest to Maura Murray, regardless of whether you believe they were very close, not close. By all available accounts and information, she was the closest person to Maura Murray. Other teammates even described her as the third wheel to her dates with assistant track coach Hussein Baghdadi. I mean, again, you cannot make this stuff up. And Aaron Larkin says she may have even driven by the supposed accident scene, the staged scene with Maura Murray's Saturn, regardless of whether Maura Murray was there or not. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. How obvious does it have to be? You have an entire Oxygen show by producers who happen to go to UMass, starring Maggie Freeling, who happen to go to UMass. And all of these individuals coming out of the woodwork, creating an entire show to downplay, as Art Roderick openly admitted, not to find the truth, but to put any police conspiracies to bed. That's what he clearly stated. So there's no confusion. over his role as a steerer and obfuscator, shutting down any kind of logical lines of inquiry in the direction of law enforcement. You have Todd Landry, an officer who was responsible for that supposedly that warrant, the Londonderry ping, in relation to Maura Murray's cell phone. This is a guy who struck and killed a civilian and was awarded a safety award, no charges filed against him. And this is in the vicinity, in the same area, and yet the steerers, obfuscators, and controls maintain it's outside of the realm of possibility that a law enforcement officer may have accidentally or otherwise harmed Maura Murray. It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. You don't see this in other cases. And the religious fervor, there's no lengths they go. I mean, there's the entire Maura Murray subreddit, a sham subreddit with sham moderators to propagate this and steer and obfuscate. You don't have this in other cases. So what would it look like if there was no steering and obfuscating? I mean, would Erin Larkin have had Kate Markopoulos on her podcast, not just once, but maybe multiple times? Maybe had a round table, Kate Markopoulos, Bill Rauch, Sarah Alfieri, maybe somebody from UMPD, like Thrasher, or other individuals. I mean, if there was nothing to cover up, is that what it would look like? Would you have Chuck West and Landry and Scarinza and all these individuals denying the existence of state troopers like John Monahan for over a year or so on the scene? Would you have that going on if everything was above board? I mean, these are the real questions that need to be asked. And again, this is very obvious, even to small children. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. If you're not completely new to true crime, and even if you are, if this is your first true crime case that you're looking at, how obvious is all of this? I mean, can it be more obvious? How could it be more obvious? That's another good question. How can it be more obvious? You have guys like Scott Wall, who had his house raided for various illicit online activities that he blamed on his son, giving now he's the computer IT security specialist or whatever. He's donating computers to Helena Murray regarding the Maura Murray investigation. Again, I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. If this was a movie or a book, it would be torn to pieces for how implausible all of this is. And yet, that's what we see unfolding in the Maura Murray case. You have authors and investigators like James Renner and John Smith being relentlessly attacked just for asking logical questions. Now, again, we actually have metrics here. We have controls. James Renner has been involved in other cases. He was involved in the Amy Mihailovic case, and he is largely credited for bringing a lot of attention to that case. Regardless of whether you believe his personal theories are true or not, he never pushes them as fact. He pushes them as theories, which is what they are. Just like in the Maura Murray case with the tandem driver. Theories are subject to change with more information, but he's reporting what was said to him, and every step of the way he was called a liar, and every step of the way he was vindicated. Just like John Smith. Through various police reports or admissions made by certain individuals, John Smith and James Renner have been vindicated every step of the way, while this same circle of steerers and trolls and obfuscators have been proven wrong every step of the way. I mean, is Erin Larkin still denying the grand jury about Bill Rauch? I mean, that was always quite amusing. She accused James Renner of making up, of inventing these victims or their words or allegations against Bill Rauch. I mean, it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. It's bonkers, if you will. The whole case is bonkers. So, again, we have these controls with James Renner. How many people revolving around the Amy Mihailovic case have called James Renner a complete liar and challenged him every step of the way? I mean, he's looked at other cases as well. You don't see this. It seems like it's only the Maura Murray case where the nut jobs came out of the woodwork to personally attack him. It's really, really bizarre. What is it about this case? Is everything above board? I mean, look at literally any other missing persons case. I recently covered, and also if you haven't checked out the Mindshock Amy Mihailovic series, check that out. in-depth, comprehensive, logical analyses of all available information in the Amy Mihailovic case, which is hopefully moving. I mean, there's been some new information, but we also have, James Renner's been involved in other cases as well. But let's look at, like, for example, the Molly Bish case. I covered that recently on Mindshock as well. Check that out. You don't have this circle of loonies, some of them personally connected to the case, going around shutting down logical conversation, creating entire sham subreddits with supposedly tens of thousands of followers. Most of those are probably duplicate accounts of this circle of trolls. But either way, you don't see this in these other cases. In other cases, you see these documentaries that come out, even on Oxygen. They're fairly objective. They examine different avenues, but you don't have this level of steering and obfuscation. So when you factor in all of these other cases where none of these is occurring, I mean, if Erin Larkin was completely honest and above board, would she have even chosen a moniker like Guerrilla Ontology? And if you haven't checked out the podcast on that, check that out. The origins of Discordianism and causing intentional strife and discord and discombobulation. This is the moniker she chose. Then you have Bill Rausch remaining silent for so many years only to come out and make these really bizarre statements. Again, he's been trained in psychological operations, specifically using social media for such purposes. And yet people still hang on every word as if everything he says is gospel. It's just really bizarre. And the defense of such an individual, look at all these other cases. The ex at the time someone went missing. Now, they're not necessarily accusing them of murder, but there's not this all-out defense party with endless duplicate accounts attacking anyone and everyone that are simply just asking questions. And if they give these weird answers, refusing to actually answer any questions directly, which of course, Bill Rausch, I mean, he can go in endless circles and he never actually answers direct questions. It's really, really bizarre. All of the he's a professional obfuscator, of course, trained with military tax dollars to be such an obfuscator and psychological operator. And yet people still believe everything's above board. Now, again, that doesn't mean he did anything to Maura Murray. Maybe he was trying to help her. I've posited that many, many times. Billy Rausch could be the good guy. But to say that it's outside of the realm of possibility that he had any kind of knowledge about either where she was going or if she was met with foul play, the nature of the foul play she was met with, he may very well have had foreknowledge of what was going on. Maybe not exactly, maybe not exact individuals' names, but he definitely seems to be operating with more information than anybody else. And then you also have bizarre behavior on the side of Maura Murray's family. Now, this is something that also gets, there's a lot of steering and obfuscation around Maura Murray's family. You have various circles of trolls and obfuscators and steerers, some who blindly defend the family, some who don't outwardly defend, but they want to shut down any questions in the direction of the family, and others who are very accusatory towards the family. Again, there's some funny business going on. Julie Murray worked for the Defense Department or a Defense Department subcontractor of some kind. Defense Department, CIA, whatever. This is, again, in the D.C. area. Does she have connections to Scott Wall, Bill Rausch, he who cannot be named, who is involved in the National Guard and or other military? There may be circulating photographs from even Maura Murray's MySpace that she might have known this individual, and this individual may have had connections to Bill Rausch or Scott Wall. Again, or these could be all made-up fake leads by this circle of steerers, trolls, and obfuscators, intentionally creating false leads, intentionally causing discord. Guerrilla ontology indeed. So, again, regarding the family, you have Fred Murray, who also has been evasive in certain respects, who hasn't given straight answers in certain respects. Did he know that either Maura Murray or someone who Maura Murray let borrow the Saturn actually hit Patrick Vassy? How many other cases have a potential hit and run connected? And how many of these cases where, if there is some other crime potentially connected, how many times does the victim in this other crime say literally, verbatim, that it's far-fetched that a missing person could be involved? Because how would he know if he was in a coma? It's almost as if, again, and again, how many in these other cases is there DEA activity, U.S. Marshal activity, all in the area of this little hamlet in New Hampshire, in some kind of small town little hamlet. All of a sudden, there's all this upper agency involvement and interest that particular night. I mean, how many suicide calls were called in that night, and how many suicide calls are called in on an average night? And the FBI shows up at UMass. Again, how many of these other cases is FBI on the ground? I don't know how many hours they were, what day they were at UMass. I believe I've mentioned it in previous podcasts. Was it the Wednesday? So she went missing, allegedly the Monday, but theoretically it might have been the Sunday. Because again, with nothing being able to be nailed down, people put all this blind faith into the ATM video. I mean, even the Pentagon had the wrong timestamp on the 9/11 security footage. Of course, that's a completely different topic there with all of the bizarreness. But either way, just doing a survey of various individuals who installed and serviced CCTV security cams systems for not just banks, but restaurants, various places of business, including government buildings, they stated that roughly 50% of all systems had a wrong timestamp circa 2004 or so. I would assume the situation's improved since that. I mean, it's been a good number of years. But back then, in the early to mid-2000s, the security timestamps are not a given. It's not a given that the released footage that took over a decade to release, 6 out of 22 frames were released or so? What's on the other frames? Is it a second person? Again, we don't know. There's liquor store footage. Again, any other missing persons case, footage is usually released right away. Now, there are exceptions, of course. The Molly Bish case was actually one of them. I wasn't even aware that there was footage of her in the convenience store minutes before her abduction. Molly Bish's, of course. There are other cases where, for whatever reason, the footage, that seems a little bit more of a straight answer based on either what she was wearing or something. Again, the Molly Bish case is, of course, a little bit older, without all of this law enforcement involvement and the FBI immediately touching down, and possible gag orders and all these other things, and the online activity. Again, just look at the online activity regarding the Molly Bish case. It's completely different than the Maura Murray case. So, yeah, again, going back to the family, Fred Murray's statements, a possible hit and run. It's almost like there's either a gag order or people are being fed lines to say regarding the case. Now, if you're fed some kind of lines to say by the FBI, would you do it? I don't know. I guess you would. You'd be afraid to not, right? I mean, a gag order would be a little simpler. Does that and what point did the gag order come in? Because Kate Markopoulos initially did talk to James Renner, and then she didn't. And so, again, even Sarah Alfieri made one or two statements before going dead silent? So something obviously happened, and other individuals have remained dead silent ever since. But it's just really, really strange. You have all of the issues at West Point and all of the silence regarding West Point, and there's just so many levels here that you don't see in other cases. But again, going back to Fred Murray and the family, did Fred Murray know that the Saturn was responsible for the hit and run? How many other cases have a vehicle that people are specifically instructed not to drive, and then somehow it ends up hours and hours away? When, again, it's just, this is an unusual case. And the trolls, steers, and obfuscators, they're very clearly different in this case. And now every case has trolls. Every case has authority bootlickers saying that law enforcement could never have been responsible for any nefarious wrongdoing, no matter how many times it comes out that there was a conspiracy, whether it's the sheriff's son or whoever, like the Tara Calico case. Early rumors are dismissed as just rumors, then it turns out there's something more to them. There's a ton of cases like that, more and more being uncovered all the time. So obviously it's not outside the realm of possibility, but look at the pushback that occurs in the Maura Murray case versus the other cases. In other cases, people are like, okay, you could believe that. I don't think it's likely, whatever. But there's a religious fervor surrounding the Maura Murray case with these online steers and obfuscators, where they really go out of their way to try to get everybody to believe that it's completely, anything other than the official narrative is completely outlandish. I mean, there's the New Hampshire League of Investigator reports accident reconstruction experts all concluded that the Saturn did not hit a tree and the accident scene was staged. Maura Murray wasn't even seen at the scene unless we're taking on blind faith as gospel the words of Butch Atwood, the least neutral party. And, of course, he said she didn't look like the pictures anyway, so it's not even a real positive ID on his part either. But the trollsteers, obfuscators, and coincidence theorists, I mean, there could be a certain component of the Dunning-Kruger crowd, the highly gullible individuals who are not officially steering or obfuscating. They think they're speaking the truth, but they're too silly to realize that this is all faith. This is not grounded in facts or reality in any way. Again, compare and contrast to other cases. There are a lot of silly goofs out there that are still maintaining nothing to see here in the Maura Murray case as if it's a standard DUI walkaway, or whatever the case may be, met with foul play by somebody picked her up and did something to her. And those are the only two viable options. And anybody saying otherwise is a kooky conspiracy theorist, aka critical thinker, where no matter how many coincidences, no matter how many anomalies, they will never bat an eye. And it is curious, what is it finally going to take for them to bat an eye? I mean, we have the largest coincidence and anomaly stack out of any true crime case in history here in the Maura Murray case by a large margin, not even by a small margin. It's a very, very large margin. And it's a still nothing to see here attitude. So it's a curious question. What would it take for all these steers, obfuscators, and trolls, or just we could just focus on the genuine people who just happen to be gullible coincidence theorists who don't really understand logic or reason or any of these logical fallacies or how they took things on faith. What would it actually take for them to say, wait a second, something is not above board in the case, the investigation, the alleged facts of the case? And why are there concerted efforts to prevent any logical examination? And I would like an answer to that question. So if there's any genuine individual out there who just maintains DUI walkaway or harmed by a stranger who happened to pass by and completely discounts all of the issues at UMass with the Saturn, with Maura Murray possibly not being at the scene, with the response, and years later in defending the response, it's curious. What would it take? I mean, how many more agencies? Do you need the Men in Black or the CIA operating in the area? And maybe they were, because when you get to those kinds of levels, there wouldn't be a paper trail. So far, we just have the paper trail with the DEA and the U.S. Marshal activity. Coincidentally, U.S. Marshal Art Roderick is brought in for the sham oxygen series. So it's all quite curious. It's quite curious how many coincidences, how many anomalies, how many conflicts of interest, how much is it going to take, and how much silence, too. You look at any other missing persons case, the university she went missing from, she's employed by the UMPD. And it's just not a peep. Not a peep. They're not all over the news calling for awareness, her safe return, any of these things. It's just dead silence at UMass. That's why I had the silent UMass episodes, which, by the way, there's another one of those coming up as well. There's even more to go over. Even still, more anomalies and coincidences at UMass. But I think it's fairly obvious the answer to the question that I originally posed at the beginning of the podcast. What would it look like if it were a standard above board case that was as of yet unsolved? I mean, there's some issues with the Molly Bish case as well, possible CIs. There's issues, but again, in terms of the social media online presence actively steering and preventing logical questions from being asked, you don't have this in other cases. Tara Calico, I mean, you have some locals who might have been involved trying to downplay, but as far as online activity, you don't see this in any other case. I mean, it's really bizarre. Really, really bizarre. So feel free to leave your own thoughts, theories, comments, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind. And if you can answer my question, how many more coincidences and anomalies are required for it to no longer be standard and above board? That's my real question here. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of the Mindshock podcast in the Maura Murray series. In the next episode, I'll be looking at possible smoking gun information regarding to the photos Cecil Smith allegedly took at the staged scene beyond the Weather Barred Corner in New Hampshire, regardless of whether it was Maura Murray at the scene, and individuals who may have directly looked at those photographs. If you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you allow your device to have those notifications come through. If that's not working, you can just go to youtube.com/Mindshock or youtube.com/Mindshock True Crime. Like and share this podcast. Keep the awareness up, not just in this cold case, but other cold cases and missing persons cases as well. You can check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.